So these are the issues. And without addressing these issues, you can produce all you want, but people will be unhappy. And if people are unhappy, then there's a proneness towards instability. Now, what are you going to see in 2014? Fiscal revenues as a percent of GDP will be 8.4%, and revenues will decline by 14% because of what has been explained. Fiscal expenditures as a percent of GDP will be 11.6%, and your excess crude account is down to $2.1 billion. Your balance, your deficit will be 3% of GDP, or it will, in fact, go lower when you have your rebasing. Exports will be $99 billion, oil and gas is 90% of it, and imports are $56 billion. External reserves as of this morning is $38.8 billion. The peak was $62 billion. National savings is 20%, inflation is 8%, and unemployment national is 30%, but when you break it out, unemployment, youth unemployment and urban unemployment takes you closer to 38%. However, what you measure is what we call the misery index. The misery index is inflation plus unemployment. If that is above a particular threshold, people are unhappy. Even if they're not saying it, they are unhappy. And their propensity to rebel and have mass violence is much higher. So you have to look at the misery index. Nigeria's median age is 18 years. The world as a whole has 38 years. So you have young, unemployed, and miserable population. Now, what are we seeing in 2014? One, GDP, according to the IMF, GDP will grow by 7.3%. Year-end inflation will be 7%. Oil prices will be lower, and fiscal buffers will dwindle. Our view is that GDP will grow by 7.28 and 5% after rebasing. Our year-end inflation projection is 11%. We don't believe that inflation will be 7 or 8%. Why? Because the price of gas has gone up from $1 to $1.50. In a few weeks, the tariff on cars are going up from 20% to 70%. Tariff on buses will go from 20 to 35%, and those will reflect in prices. Oil price will decline, and the buffers will reduce. That's our view. Well, what will happen when Nigeria rebases? On March 31st, you'll be at $425 billion. Your redistribution of the sectors will change, and agriculture will drop from 40% to 25% because, telecoms will go from about 8% to almost 20% because in 1990 when we rebased, we had only 400,000 lines. Now we have over 100 million lines. So, what's the transition we are going to see from a commodity-dependent economy to a mixed reliance on diverse sectors? So, agriculture is subsistence, moves to missionary, subsistence when you feed yourself, missionary when you feed your community, and commercial when you feed the world. That transition is taking place. Dr. Additional is doing a great job out there in mobilizing the views and putting structures in place. So this is the highest contributor to GDP. It employs more people, and it also keeps people. But don't forget, Nigeria is now having a 53% urbanization rate. Urbanization means that people are moving from the rural area to the urban areas. Or some rural areas are becoming urban areas. So even if they don't move, urbanization is catching up with them. Now, agriculture accounted for $1.3 billion of the $2.6 billion earned in non-oil exports. So even though the output is increasing, the value of the exports is not going anywhere because commodity prices are declining. Now, structure and economics of the business, highly fragmented, and all the experts have talked about. I'm not going to waste your time on it. Now, let us look at what we are seeing for states. In terms of state sector output dominated by oil and gas, you can see it here. I think number one here is rivers, Akwa Ibom, the usual suspects. And then there's zero oil all the way here. Now, crop production, Niger State, Benue State, Kaduna, Sokoto, Zamfara, and all the way. Then the oil states, I think Delta is somewhere up there. Wholesale and retail trade, Lagos, FCT, rivers. So, again, oil is produced in the Delta, shared in Abuja, and spent across the land, right? Now, so this is mining and quarrying. This is wholesale and retail. Mining and quarrying, Bayelsa small. The biggest one here is Edo State. For wholesale and retail trade, among the states, rivers number one, Edo, Delta, and it goes all the way down this way. Manufacturing, rivers, Edo, and it goes all the way this way. Agriculture is declining this way, right? Now, income profile of states. You have the very poor, the moderate, the fairly rich, and the rich, right? So you can take a look at them and make your decisions, right? Now, internally generated, you can see the difference here. You see Lagos, Rivers, Kano, Ogun, Edo, Oyo, Delta, Bauchi, and it goes all the way this way. So the picture, the Nigerian economic picture is very clear to determine. And if you superimpose this population, superimpose this on votes, the picture, the political calculus begins to change. What are the business opportunities in agriculture? To grow food, create jobs, and then this is from Akin Additional's presentation. Large internal market, 167 million people, large labor force. But the people have to have earning power. If you use GDP per capita to compute standard of living, you're making a mistake. What you should be looking for is consumption per capita. And when you look at that, you'll find that in Borno State, the income per capita is $800, while in Abuja, it's about $3,500. In Lagos, it's $2,700. So there's a big income differential across the states of this country. So expansive unutilized land, abundant water resources, and opportunity agriculture, which have been discussed in detail by the individual. But Nigeria's top agricultural products, 10. Number 1, cassava. Number 2, yams. Number 3, maize. Number 4, sorghum, fresh vegetables, rice, citrus, then groundnuts, cashew nuts, and indigenous cattle meat. So agriculture on the front burner of the present administration, sectors 41% largest contributor, but it's going to go down to 20. Massively available market for producers with a population of over 165 million. Nigeria accounts for 6% of global cocoa production. So you have Ivory Coast, Ghana, and then Nigeria. Constraints, there are social constraints, political constraints, economic constraints, but the biggest constraint is weak institutions and directionless leadership. Now, infrastructure, financing, and supply security are most common challenges cited by everybody. Top 4 challenges: infrastructure, financing, securing supplies, and all of this. But the good news is that the cashless revolution is now making payment for agricultural products almost instantaneous. The bulk of the financing costs for agriculture and most of businesses in Nigeria is that you pay only when you release your goods only when you have got cleared good money in your account. The reality is that with instant payments and POS terminals, you can pay. I can collect my cattle from you, I can collect my rice from you, and we can go into a forward market to settle transactions. Agriculture now becomes bankable, and money will go there. But the country cannot continue to live on natural wealth. It has to move strategically towards a produce wealth economy. Other factors to consider we've talked about. But more important is that an exchange rate depreciation of the currency, which is inevitable, whether we like it or not, in the near term, probably after the election, is that it makes your agricultural products more competitive. It also makes the importation of food items more expensive. But one thing is clear, is that, 1, the oil price goes down, oil revenues go down. 2, the Nigerian currency will become convertible over the next 4 to 5 years, which means that exchange control and all this nonsense will stop. And therefore, you will have a free-floating exchange rate. 3 is that Nigeria will sign what they call the WTO, which means that the World Trade Organization and which means that there will be no barriers to trade. West Africa will become one market. That has to be managed because there's levies and import duties which have to be used to protect some early stage investments. But in any case, the world is moving in that direction. The world has 3 different economies. 1, the service economy. 2, the processing economy, and then the producer economy. And that's why you saw in a few days ago that WhatsApp was bought for $19 billion, and a company that has only 47 employees, and that was founded only 5 years ago. The world is rewarding innovation and creativity, and not just production and sweat. So it's working smart rather than working hard. And finally, I would like to leave you with Farid Zakaria's words that policymakers, when you want to evaluate any policymaker, any politician, and anybody, there are 3 ways of checking them out. First of all, you have to ask them, 1, have they stopped doing stupid things? You tick that box. So anytime you open the newspapers and you say something, you just ask, is this a stupid thing? If it is yes, then that country or that region or that state is in trouble. Second, countries have to start doing smart things. So you tick that box, is this a smart thing? And finally, after you do smart things, then you begin to do modern things. So if you wake up in the morning and hear that so has happened, that they've changed one road to one way and all that, you ask yourself, is this a stupid thing? If it's not a stupid thing, then you tick the box. Maybe it's a smart thing. If it's not a smart thing, ask whether it's a modern thing. At the end of the year or at the end of the month, you tick your boxes and say, okay, how many stupid things, how many smart things, how many modern things? And then you can decide almost anecdotally where people's sentiment and vote. And the reality is that if revenues could solve Nigeria's problem would have been solved before now. Because in 1998, the price of oil was $10 a barrel. And in 2 years after that, it went up to over 100. In other words, your income increased by over 1,000%. And if the problems got worse, and you ask yourself, between 1998 and now, are you happier? And if the answer is no, then money is not the issue. The problem is that there's a management problem. Management means that resources have to be managed efficiently. And if resources are managed efficiently, the outcome is positive. People become happier, and then there'll be less proneness to instability. So you've got to ask yourself very clearly, how are we going to deal with the management issue? Political reality, if you read The Economist of this week, it says, what has gone wrong with democracy? Voter apathy. People are frustrated because democracy is a numbers game. Stability is about having it economically right. And economic rightness or correctness is about management. So I would like to leave you with this message that, remember, the problem is not the resources, the problem is not the policies, the problem is more of management and more than anything else, weak institutions. Thank you very much.